everyone, and welcome to this month's community interview. I am Dr. Erin Conn, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Sea Change at the AAAS. And here today with me is Dr. Susan Elrod at Indiana University South Bend, and she will be leading one of our upcoming Sea Change Institute courses entitled Building Leadership Capacity to Achieve DEI Goals. So I'm very excited to have you here today, Dr. Elrod, and have this conversation about this tool that you've created that will center this upcoming Institute course around. So if you'd like to provide any more background on the work that you're doing at Indiana University South Bend before we dive into this tool, that would be great to share with our audience.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I'm thrilled to be able to offer the upcoming course to the Sea Change community. The work that will center the course is work I've been doing for 15 years now with Dr. Adriana Kezar, who is an expert in higher education, leadership, change, and many other aspects of organizational development in higher education. So Adriana and I have been working together, really started when I was director of Project Kaleidoscope over 10 years ago, working on interdisciplinary programs and basically difficult to maneuver programs or what turned out to be systemic change efforts. So in 2016, we published a model for systemic change that we lovingly refer to as the River Model, and that was published at AAC&U because that's where I was working at the time. And since that time, as we've been working with campuses and teams and various other projects, what we found as a gap was it was one thing to understand the process of change, and there are many frameworks and models that describe processes or theories of change. But what we found that was missing was people didn't know how to lead the change. How do you actually do it? And so for several years now, starting with a grant from the National Science Foundation, we developed what we're calling now a Change Leadership Toolkit. And so it is essentially a way to operationalize change leadership. So what moves or actions do leaders take? In what contexts? What levers do they pull? And how can they create a plan for an entire team of leaders? Because systemic change takes many, many leaders. And so we've created also an ecosystem model to help frame that out for campus teams.
So it sounds like the real driver behind developing the Change Leadership Toolkit was the need for people as individuals to develop their capacity for leadership.
Absolutely. And when I say leader, and when we say leader in the toolkit, we mean any kind of leader, not just the provost or the dean or the department chair, but faculty leaders, staff leaders, student leaders, anybody who is engaged and involved in a systemic change effort. And so we've really focused the toolkit really for newer leaders, people who are new to solving complex challenges and trying to get the many different parts of a system, the university in most cases, to change. Because in order to do that, you've got to understand the system, you've got to be able to navigate the system and maneuver within it, pulling levers and making those leader moves.
Awesome. So a lot of institutions are starting to invest in professional development opportunities for staff and faculty around change management. So how do you envision the Change Leadership Toolkit being a resource for people who might already be familiar with change management frameworks? How is it different from other change management resources that people might have encountered before?
Right. So the toolkit is agnostic of your favorite change management or leadership framework, process, whatever it is, theory. It's agnostic of goal. So it's really just focused on, based on what you're trying to achieve, which you need to articulate. Here's a tool, a set of tools actually, that will help you develop a plan to achieve them through your leadership actions. So there are lots of other things that need to happen in a change project, and those are not included in the tool. So this strictly focuses on there's a set of core 6 worksheets that step leaders through identifying the core contextual elements that are at play in their systemic change project, from internal to campus to external environment. Then it asks leaders to do an analysis of possible levers they might be able to pull to accelerate or amplify the change. And then we take a deep dive into the 8 categories of leader moves that we've defined over time, interviewing and working with over 100 change leaders across the United States. Dive into those moves and ask, what have you already done? Like, so some of these moves you might have made. So let's categorize those. And then what haven't you done? And then we take leaders through a series of steps that help them prioritize the next 1 or 2 categories of leader moves that they might make as they develop a plan. And so the leader move categories really are the guts of, I would say, the Change Leadership Toolkit. And they're everything from obvious things like creating a vision, developing a strategy, to the less obvious or less focused on, I guess I would say, to things like fostering diversity in your team and focusing on that in everything you do. Really important for advancing DEI goals in particular. Preparing for success over the long term. One of my favorite categories is navigating politics and being an advocate. A lot of new leaders are often afraid or unfamiliar or worried about entering the political fray of a campus. But that's where power, money decisions, skeptics, influencers, allies are. Your change project can either be helped by your ability to navigate that successfully, or you can get completely stalled if you haven't thought about who are the skeptics that I need to get on my team, or how can I get the provost? What is my strategy for getting the provost on board with this? And so the toolkit helps leaders map all that out and come up with a plan.
That's awesome. So with the toolkit being agnostic of goals, something that we see as really valuable within Sea Change is that the ultimate goal of Sea Change is to effect systemic change within a campus to achieve equity. So can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts about how Sea Change member institutions who are taking on this work, or institutions who want to be part of Sea Change and take on this work, can use the toolkit to their advantage as they do this really difficult self-assessment and action planning process?
Yes, I think it's a great compliment, because Sea Change is helping people really think about what those goals are and identifying challenges, issues, etc. And I think where the toolkit will be most useful, beyond helping Sea Change teams develop that leader move plan, but up front, we have you dive into contextual factors and levers. And so any change initiative that is trying to focus on diversity, inclusion, equity goals is automatically a systemic change initiative, because things have to change infrastructurally across the campus. Things like policies, things like practices, things like budget allocations, all manner of things at the core of the institution need to change. And so that automatically means systemic change. And so I think having Sea Change members take a step back with the work they've already done and look at the context, look at the levers in particular. And what we do is we identify a set of about a dozen categories of levers. These are everything from things like a new campus strategic plan to a statewide law or policy that may seem like a challenge or a barrier, but maybe you can leverage that. A statewide tuition benefit program, a National Science Foundation grant that the campus could apply for or has already received, or participation in Sea Change, for example. That's a great lever to use. So I think it might really help Sea Change members really take a step back and look at the whole picture of what they're trying to do, and then use those tools in addition to map out a leadership plan. One tool we provide, and I think Sea Change is also helping teams with this, is really looking deep at who's on your team. So we feel like once you look at the context, the levers, and you start to look at the moves that need to be made, then you can also take a step back and say, do we have everyone we need on the team? Are we missing some key people who might be allies that we didn't think of before, or people who might have skill sets or access to people or things or experiences that might diversify the team in a way that will help the team be even more successful?
This is all very exciting, and you're right. This is something every Sea Change member that we have thus far, all 20 something of them, building the team is the first step to this work, and it's important to have that inventory of who you need to work with. And so we're very grateful to you and excited to have you host this course with us, Building Leadership Capacity to Achieve DEI Goals. And that's coming up in March. Folks can find the registration info for that in Sea Change Port of Call, the Sea Change community, or check your emails in the future for course information. And so, Dr. Elrod, I just want to close with one more question for you, if that's all right. So we talk a lot about the policies, processes, procedures that we need to focus on. And the toolkit is clearly going to be a very useful resource for folks as they take on that work. But what's something that you would say to some of those newer leaders that you mentioned before? What's a piece of wisdom or advice you'd give to them as they take on this work?
I would say that you are more powerful than you probably know. You have more skills and agency than you probably have thought about. And so I would encourage people to be in touch with who you are. So one part of the toolkit that we developed was a section on leader agency, which is what do you bring to your leadership role? And I'll give a quick, just personal example. I am a scientist. And when I was a younger leader, I put my scientist side aside because I didn't think it was relevant to leadership. Well, it turns out it is. So I'm a data-driven leader. Why? Because I'm a scientist, and that's how I grew up. And so now I have fully embraced my scientist self as a leader. And that agency that I bring means that I am in data-driven conversations all the time. Woo, my happy place, right? I'm a scientist, love data. Give me a chart, give me a graph, do an analysis. Where are the error bars? So I'm challenging my leadership team to do the same. And so I would say to younger leaders, spend some time thinking about who you are, your agency, what do you bring to the project, to the work, your passion. Why is it that you want to be involved in this? Because when you have to sell what you're doing to others, that passion and your agency is going to help.
Thank you so much. This has been so insightful. Thanks for introducing the Change Leadership Toolkit to us. And we're looking forward to seeing you in March for the Institute course, Building Leadership Capacity to Achieve DEI Goals. Dr. Elrod, thank you again.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in the course.